It's your girl Mocaso, and I'm super excited for another Women in the Metaverse where we are going to come together and have mind elevating conversations. And they're going to be iron sharpening. I know y'all remember that's our saying, and it's 2023, and that has not changed. We are going to be in here having iron conversations, looking at these amazing spaces. I know y'all see the snowy mountains. It's always a vibe here in the treehouse, so make sure you come visit on Mondays, where we are always talking about different topics like the current events or just about life and how we can make sure that we are successful and understand what's happening in order for us to be successful. So without further ado, I'm ready to dive right in, because if you've never seen Women in the Metaverse before, you've got to check out another episode, but you'll catch right up, where we like to mostly pose a question or a thought or idea and hear from everyone that joins about that. And sometimes it is a smaller group, like just myself, and I kind of just go on for a bit, and then sometimes we do have more. And then I always ask for our listeners to also share what they think, because I think we can also learn a lot from each other. And then we have this amazing clubhouse where you can actually come and watch all of the replays anytime you like. Grab a bottle of wine. On the second floor we have pedicure chairs and so much more. But let's get right into the conversation, because I'm actually really excited about that. This month, our theme is, or this season, better yet, which is 3 months long, our theme is variation. And a raw variation, right? Because we're the raw network, or raw DAO, P2d raw network, and we keep it raw, and our theme is variation. Now, last week we talked about just what that means, and we kind of went deep with it, with variables that even create different variations, and how we have so many different variables that make up us, and that's why then our variation of our perspective is valuable. And so I want to dive a little bit deeper into this concept by, again, thinking about how it applies to our future. So this week I want to talk about the different variations of our lives, and then next week we'll talk about the different variables in our lives, and then next week we'll talk about the different variations of our future based on these different variables. And I think, again, this is where we'll really see that true impact on this concept, and how variables truly make an impact on the different variation that we have. I kind of was thinking of it when I was thinking of this idea for how we'll spend the next few weeks actually talking. Let me see, is it 3 Mondays? No, it's just 2. Okay, great. I had to double check that real quick. But yes, so for that, it was, again, how can we expand on this idea? And when I was thinking about it, I was thinking of that Men in Black movie, where it was like the guy could see the future, but there was a lot of different variations for the future, right? So they'd be standing there and he's like, oh, is this the one where it plays out like this? And then something would happen and he'd be like, oh no, this is the one where it's going to play out like this. And then something else could happen, and then it would again change the ending. And I think, again, that is a powerful idea when we start thinking about those different variables. And I see Tiny's in the house. Woo woo. So I'm gonna let Tiny get in here and get situated before we get all up in the conversation. But that was perfect timing. Hey, friend. Welcome.
Hey, my bad. The kids are being that loud.
It is okay. I think that's your first time in the treehouse. Welcome.
Yeah, this is my first time coming here.
Right? Okay, well, now we gotta go upstairs. I was just all down here chilling. But this is for everybody that's watching the podcast, where you can come and watch after. But like Tiny said, she got the kids, so we're gonna come up here in the pedicure chairs, take a little chill and cool it, and dive into this juicy conversation about variables and variations. And I was just going on this conversation here, saying how last week when I was talking about it, we're going to spend the month talking about our theme, which is variation. So last week I really went in on how we have different variables in each of our lives that create our own variation of the truth, right? Our own variation of life, and that becomes valuable because nobody else has like all of the variables that make us, and that's valuable in itself. And so I would love to have the conversation this week to again dive into those variables and then also the variations. So we're going to do that by actually talking about our future, because that's what this is all about, stuff to help us actually prepare for our future. So this week we'll be talking about the different variables that we are facing when it comes to achieving our goals and things in our lives, and the different variations of the future based on how these variables can play out. And then I also just finished wrapping up an example, which I think might even make more sense, because I feel like this gets super philosophical. But like if you've ever seen Men in Black, and there was that guy that could see the future, and so something would happen, and he's like, oh, this is how it's going to play out. Like this is the one with the ending where the guy wins the lottery, but then something else will happen, and he'd be like, oh no, wait, this is the one when the ending is going to be like the guy dies or something. And so, a slight change in choices or a slight change in decision making, or even life can change, right? Because one of the biggest variations was this pandemic that none of us had even accounted for, that propelled a lot of people, and those kind of variations in our lives that are controllable or not controllable. I wanted to kind of touch on those, like what kind of variables do you have control of, and what kind of variables do you not? And then that way, again, we can talk more in depth next week about the kind of ways that we see our future then looking at, based on these different variables that we have, that we'll be talking about today. So everybody watching, I want to make sure you guys also leave it in the comments. I know we don't keep the conversation going here too long. We're just here to share our thoughts on that, and we would love to hear yours as well. So make sure you take part in the conversation. And I could kick it off as well, again, talking about those different variables, because that's what today is. What variables are in your life? What is one variable that you feel like is controlled but is definitely a variable, and then one that is not controlled and as a variable, and then maybe a wild card, because I have like an extreme variable that is always like things could happen. So for me, I would say one of the non-controlled variables is like how people receive you and how big and fast you grow. Because you put your time in, and we always say, especially like TikTok now, we're planning our social media and trying to put it out there, and you might have the right time and have the right posts and have the right hashtags, but there's still different variables that I feel are uncontrollable almost when it comes to actually how fast you grow and when you grow. And so for us, or for me at least, super personally, that is a variable. And so one of the things that I'm doing to try to like help curve that variable, or like if we're thinking about it in an equation, right? So okay, if we have this variable, well, how do we solve the equation to get the answer? And so for me, that is expanding and trying to join other communities, and just trying to connect with others and attach to what they've got going as well, in order to help everyone. Because again, for me, it's like, right now we're creating Women in the Metaverse. To me, the biggest unknown variable for that is how many people is going to watch it. And that's what I mean by that. Because I can show up here every single Monday at 4 p.m. I can say the one variable is how many other people will show up. But, even if nobody else is there, I'll be here talking. So that's okay. But the biggest variable that makes the impact for me is how many people watch it. Right? Because that's something that I can't necessarily control. I can post it more. I can put it out there. I can, do all kind of different things. But how many people actually watch it or even enjoy it or, put forth the effort to comment, that's a variable. And I think, again, that variable reflects also how much we grow and how fast we grow. And that's also a huge variable for someone like myself who's always trying to like plan things, and not being able to time exactly when things like that will occur is important. And so right now it's just fun to be able to watch the growth and be able to predict that. And of course, there's always variables with that as well. And so I would say that's one of mine that are not controlled. I can't control what people enjoy, what people watch, if people want to watch it. And that's a big variable for me. I will also say a controlled variable would also be children. And this, I love tying it into women in the metaverse, is because I currently have one child, but I want more children. And, that's a variable. And in my that will alter my future, because having a kid then changes so much. You're now more sleepy, right? So maybe you get less done, or you have to take care of yourself. I won't be able to spend so much time maybe staying up trying to get projects done, or just having to devote a lot of time to that. And then to kids in general, right? Tiny over here just had her third child, and having three little ones. I have one little one who's just always like, his thing is asking me to play in his room with his Hot Wheels, and like finding something that requires you to be present. And I think we all made it a point that we want to be present and active parents in our kids' lives, and don't want things like us building to take away from that, because then it's also counterproductive. So that's why when I say, that's why children are another variable for me, although it's controlled, because for the most part I can control when that happens, how many. Of course, accidents happen, and I'm not one to go against God's plan, but those are more things that I can control. But they are big variables that will definitely change the future. So, from my perspective as someone who's building this content in the metaverse, those uncontrollable factors that will affect my future is how people receive it. And then, personal ones that I can control, that are controllable variables, are my personal life and how that affects it. Like I said, having kids. I think in a business professional world, a lot of people face that. It's crazy. I've been like following Issa Rae for a little bit, and she actually doesn't have kids because she feels the same. And I think a lot of women end up facing that. And that's because they're big variables. They definitely change your life. So that is my perspective. I'm gonna save my wild card variables for some of the crazy things that I think could also happen. But I would love to see if Tiny had anything that she wanted to share as well, with any variables that you can control or that you cannot control, that you feel will affect your future.
I would say, the kids, kind of just like raising the kids throughout their life, just because, they're going through different changes. I got 4, 2, and a newborn, so they're all going to be going through different changes and stuff that I'm going to have to be present for. So there's definitely that.
Yeah.
And then another one that I could control is like more self-care, like taking care of myself, because I think we talked about that on one of the Women in Metaverse, is just how I can't really take care of anybody else unless I'm happy myself. So that's something that I can control, which affects my whole family. I'll say that. And maybe like procrastination, I can control that. I'm not very good at controlling it yet, but stuff like that, where I could make sure that I'm doing what I need to do for my future self, like you always talk about. So
Yes.
and the uncontrolled, I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what I would say for that one.
Well, that one would be, let's see, some uncontrollable
Like
variables.
the state of the union. I can't
Right?
really control what's going on.
That's a good one. I mean, and you're farming right now, so how about the weather, right? That played a big factor for you. Inflation, things becoming more expensive, like all of that is variables that it's like, you're over here trying to make your plan for your garden, but what if now soil's more expensive, and now you're spending way more on one thing than you thought, and there are a lot of variables taking place. What if it's hotter this year again, all kind of things.
Yeah, that's how it was last year. That's what when I first my first year out, it was like everybody had a bad year because the summer was so hot and the weather just does like the craziest things here. So
Right? It's been
that's a
raining.
good
It's
one.
been raining for like 2 weeks in Vegas. And I'm like, dude, it never rains in Vegas. What the heck is happening right now? So I think, we definitely going to have to watch out for that weather and those being those uncontrollable variables that are affecting us all, right? Because like you said, that's a fact affecting you, the real farmers. Everybody had a bad season. Now that affected all of us consumers. Eggs is expensive, and it's really interesting that we had our poultry class and we were talking about eggs and selling eggs, and it's like that's a whole business now. If you would have watched that episode when Women in the Metaverse was talking about getting you some chickens and selling your eggs for the chicken, they expensive eggs now, and that's why it's important for us to have these kind of conversations so that we can even understand that. And I think, like you said, even those variables like taking care of ourselves, that matters because health is wealth, right? Like you said, we can't do anything else if you get sick now whatever you thought you was about to do, you can't do anyways. So although we might start thinking those variables are minuscule, like, oh well, I'll just push through and pull another 24 hour, because I think that's one of those things that always get me, like I like you said, the procrastination, and then I don't sleep because I'm trying to get stuff done, and then you could just feel the effects of that, and that's not healthy, especially for the long term. And I think that's where you see people who suffer from burnout and different things like that long term. And so when you're trying to build again for that long term, that's why these controlling these variables and just identifying them are keys to that success, because then you say, hey, you know what, I can control that. And I know that is one of the things that is affecting why this comes out good sometimes and why it doesn't. And if I control that a little bit more, my results will be a little bit better, right? And then we can get to use that to our advantage, where then we start to control the outcome, which we will even talk about more next week. Like, okay, well, what is a few variations of your future? How do you see your kids, when they're in their teens? Or like you said, you're going to have them all at different ages, and there's a lot of different ways that could play out. And again, understanding those different variations of how that can happen, I think it also helps us understand how you even get to that point so that you can be preventative for, to eliminate undesired outcomes and really make sure that what you're doing in your now helps you to achieve those goals that you're trying to get. And again, even control your variation of the future, because I know that was something that I definitely had to learn as a woman, was that you don't just have to always go with the flow. Like, it's great that we could go with the flow, but it's even better when you steer that ship and you drive to where you're supposed to go, and regardless of the storm and regardless of it all, and you make it to your destination safe. Because sometimes you could get detoured, end up on another island, gotta fight some pirates, and like, yes, we got strength, that we are strong and smart and gonna make it out, but maybe you lost all your treasure, destroyed your boat, had to fight for your life, maybe lost somebody, and then make it to your destination. And again, those are the things that we can control by identifying that now. And that's why I'm encouraging everybody to drop in the comments one variable that is out of your control and one variable that is in your control. And you've heard a few different examples from myself and from Tiny. And if you still need a little bit more clarification about what the heck we're even talking about, go and listen to the last episode, because I dropped some more of it and went a little bit more into depth. And like I said, next week we'll even go into capturing how we see the future being affected by this. And so I wanted to drop my super very variable on everybody, though, because we are in Web3. We are here in the metaverse. So I think it's only right to also, put a spin and talk about the different variables that actually have to do with this as well. Especially because Tiny herself said, the state of union. A lot of those different things can control that, right? The first time when things got locked down, you've seen things like Instagram pop up. I don't know about you, Tiny, but I was big on watching those verses. Were you watching verses on Instagram? during the pandemic.
Yeah, I caught a couple of them. Do they still do them? I caught a couple.
I don't know if they still do them, but you see what I'm saying? Like, oh, that was what we was all doing when it was happening, and now we don't even know what's happened to it, right? um, but those are those kind of things that can come out of these random variables that can then kind of, be created from that. And so, for myself, understanding, okay, well, we're in Web3, and we would love for people to, mass adopt it. And I think with that being said, a controlled variable is we can control, the people that we want to onboard. And although we can't control if they do and how much they're committed to it, reaching out to people in DM, showing these people what we have going on. We create different proof of concepts to give everybody an example of what we have going on. And we take it serious, the community that we're building and the people that we want to be a part of that and represented in it. And although again we can't control necessarily who these people are, we can control that culture that we are forming. And so that's a control variable to me in this world, where it's like, there's a lot of people that do see this space, that do get it, and that are forward thinking. They see the Web3 tools. There's a lot that the metaverse can do. Right now, spatial is broken. Okay, that's a variable. I got trust issues. Spatial is broken. Y'all see us right here because we've had this space for a while. But if I would have tried to make a new space, we would not be in here today because it's broken. And I've seen a lot of sad stories about people that just came in and they were having their events planned this week, and they don't know what to do, and those are those kind of variables whenever you deal with tech, because not just, shoot down spatial for this weekend of, that happening or whatever, because that can happen to anyone. It can happen in any metaverse. It's happened to us in Neo's metaverse when we were having a fashion show, and, it was open source, and we learned a lot about what it takes to be able to co-create. And there are a lot of variations because, again, you don't know what other people are bringing to the table, and the tools and the objects and, the variations that they will come with as well. So, those are variations, how tech will work. And with that, I think that is one of the uncontrollable variations, which is how tech will work. And I think one of the super variations that I always kind of think about is, they always allude to this big black swan event and like these different ideas of what could happen. And for me, being someone who is very attached to the digital twin and this digital sphere, when they talk about one of those black swan events being like a digital blackout, that is something that definitely interests me. And or not interest me like to say like, oh my god, I don't want that to happen. Like, that is like the worst case scenario to me. And I think that is a big variable, when we see the world and the state of the world, and just so much that can transpire. We wouldn't have imagined Ukraine and Russia going to war a year ago, but it happened, and it's still happening, and we're still living in that. And again, you just never know how things can continue to transpire. And so, especially, I was watching this one show, Peripheral, last night on Amazon. If y'all haven't seen it, y'all know I'm always watching these super futuristic, like New World Order shows on Amazon because they be talking my language. And it was really cool because it was like the idea of the show was, and I love Amazon shows like this because they always seem like normal, like shot in today's time, but are like based on the future, which is like, it's such a mind like mess with. I love it. So they're in like present day and they're using the VR sets, but when you put the VR set, you're actually traveling to the future. And so it was like, and that's because the people in the future had developed the set and they were going back in time. So it was like this really like different thing. And so at first they go on thinking it's just a game, and then they find out like, oh, the people from the future are actually trying to like fast forward time so that like the catastrophes in the world end up speeding up basically. And so one of those catastrophes, well, some of them was like really cool with how they like link people to animals, which is something that we all kind of talk about with the like mind control of the animals. So I thought that was really interesting. But they had this catastrophe where that happened. The grid was blacked out. And so again, that's why I say, to me, those are like some of those massive variables I think can continue to shake the world. I just seen a post today saying that the CDC had actually found a concern in the shot that they had everyone taking. Not trying to say too many crazy words, pull up the algorithm bots on me. Because it's not my concern, because everybody has their own choices to make and what they feel like is best for them in their life choices. But we have to live with them. And we're going to start seeing the short-term and long-term effects for a lot of decisions that we've all been making in these past few years. And it's crazy that it's like, 2023? Because I remember when all that happened, it was 2020, right? And then 2021. And so here we are years later. And I think, again, by 2025 is when we will really see, again, another evolution of a lot of things, like how we just seen like a big transformation in the world. I think by then, again, we'll start seeing it'll be normal to see like robot police maybe, or drone Uber Eats, and the things on the lock in the stores, like all of that kind of stuff will just be normal. Or any kind of thing. I'm not gonna say I'm predicting the future, but I'm just gonna keep studying and be mindful of the different variables and variations of the future. So with that being said, Tiny, did you have any crazy variables for the future that you wanted to put out there, that you have in mind, that you keep your eyes out for?
No, but when you said that the digital blackout, that kind of scares me, because especially because we build so much in the digital. Like, if all this were to just be like wiped away, I honestly, that's a whole life reset. Like, damn, okay, what do I do now? What do I do now?
You feel me? What you gotta do is you gotta get out. You gotta get out before it happens. We gotta get secure before then, because then that's how you get in a good position. Whenever you see them shows, you gotta be on the other side before that happens. So that's definitely been my idea too, especially with my birthday being this week. For anybody who doesn't know, I'm like, man, I got a couple years left in our 30s, and again, I'm like, we got 2 years before 2025. We got to put ourselves in the best position for any of that kind of stuff. And we're starting off great because we've already got a strong ecosystem, and I think we'll be able to achieve a lot together, especially as we continue to grow, strengthen our knowledge across all the different industries when it comes to commerce, growing, building anything, and just building more connections and, powerful allies. That's all that will help us. So you guys hear it. There's so many different variations, even between just two people. We shared so many different variables, and I know all of our listeners have even more, and we want to hear about them. So make sure you drop it in the comments, whether you're watching on YouTube or on Twitter, or even on our podcast on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, Google, or iHeartRadio. We want to see your comments as well, and we want to see you here in our Women in the Metaverse Treehouse joining the conversation. So dare to join us if you're ready to see what kind of variations you can add into your life. If you do, we're here every Monday at 4 p.m. Pacific time, and y'all see we don't waste no time. So come enjoy, and I hope you have a great night. Peace.